I've always had a fascination with double barrel shotguns. I think I've done a couple of videos on them before, talking about why did I want this shotgun and things like that. Really, because the old Western movies, there's always a guy in a stagecoach that had one of these shotguns, or in a lot of movies, there's a bad guy or even a good guy that has a sawed off shotgun that's a double barrel. But I'd been after a 12 gauge side by side shotgun for a while. I have a 20 gauge Stoeger Coach gun, and honestly, I would have bought a 12 gauge Stoeger Coach gun, but I wanted something that was a little bit more authentic and a little bit more historical and American. So I'd been looking around for a while at Cabela's and local gun shops, and you can always find a couple of things. I found a couple of Parker side by sides that one of them was absolutely thrashed, wasn't really worth buying. One of them that was very expensive. And then I also found an LC Smith. However, I happened upon something at a shop that was actually pretty cool and warranted a little bit more investigation. And what I ended up finding was a Savage Fox Model B Series H, which I hadn't heard about before. And this guy, A.H. Fox, going all the way back to the 1890s, had made side by side shotguns. And they were actually considered to be some of the finest American made shotguns ever for the time period. I think he actually called them the finest shotgun ever. There were something like six grades originally, and he also had some Sterling Worth graded guns, which was actually another company that he worked for. Later on in time, as time went on, Stevens actually purchased the Fox name and they started producing them very similarly to how A.H. Fox had made them back in the day. And Savage produced these from 1929 up until 1986. Now, through the research that I've been able to do on my particular shotgun, this one has factory 24-inch barrels. It dates to 1975, and mine is the internally hammer-fired double trigger model. It has select walnut furniture on it, and it's in pretty nice shape. Now, when I looked at this in the store, it was listed for $450, and honestly, it was absolutely filthy inside. When you'd open up the barrels, you could see down that they hadn't been cleaned in a long time. There was a lot of grit and grime in the action and the extractors, and the stock was loose. So I tried talking the salesman down to get a deal, but he said he would have had to call the owner and I would have had to wait a couple of days. So I took a chance on it, especially knowing that if I'm going to buy something from a Turkish manufacturer, they're probably going to be at least $400 or $450 anyway. Now, when I started doing research on this, obviously I ran into another Such Double Lot video. He had one of these that he had purchased years ago, and a lot of the research that he had done found that these were actually extremely well built guns. They were simply made, so they had a box lock action on them, and they had about the fewest parts that you could possibly have in these. So they were well known to be kind of the working man's gun that was exceptionally made for the time period, and they just don't break very often. They're easy to work on, they're easy to take apart and clean. And again, as you look at the action here, it's pretty interesting with case hardened bluing on the receiver. Again, that nice walnut furniture. Again, mine is a little bit unique with the 24-inch barrels with the chokes machined into them, but it's pretty neat. Very simple action with extractors, not ejectors. And again, when I got this home, the first thing I did was completely strip the thing down and look at it. There's some interesting facts in here. This forend has a spring-loaded mechanism inside that keeps tension on it all the time, so you don't have to be adjusting anything as time goes on. Again, I mentioned when I got this, it wasn't in the best shape. It did have some spots of rust on the barrel, which I've been working on. The extractor was so gummed up, it was actually pretty difficult to get out of the gun. I had to do tons of scrubbing on it and actually file a couple of areas that had some kind of ribs on them that needed to be taken off. Around the chambers, you can see there that it had a lot of caked up powder, and just in general, it wasn't really that well taken care of. So, in my normal fashion, I did as much cleaning as I could, used some light oil with a penny to try to take up as much of the scaly rust as I could. And it's still not perfect, but again, for a gun that is, 50 years old at this point in time, it doesn't look too bad knowing that it's probably been neglected. somebody had refinished the stock, and I think the fore end at one part, and there's one part of this video where you can actually see drips in the urethane on the stock. So at one point in time, somebody did try to take care of this thing and at least preserve the wood on it to last. I'm thinking that this was probably a working man's gun used in the 70s and 80s for hunting and putting food on the table, and it probably was just stored up in a closet in not the greatest fashion. The triggers in this thing are pretty phenomenal. They break cleanly between 5.5 and 6 pounds repeatedly, and there's no take up. It's just a hard wall that breaks at that 5.5 or 6 pounds. But at any rate, this gun is a very nice example of a 12 gauge side by side shotgun. I'm proud to own it. So thanks again for watching another edition of Cranky Gun Reviews. God bless America. Support your 2A rights. Get out there and shoot. And you remember, if someone asks you to give up some of your freedom for the greater good, that freedom is hard fought and freedom is the greater good.